What would you do if the one person meant to protect you became your worst nightmare? That question became a horrifying reality on the night of January 25th, 2025, when flames consumed a home in a quiet neighborhood with 3 children trapped inside. The fire raged, swallowing everything in its path. Smoke billowed into the night sky, a desperate plea for help. Neighbors woke to the roar of destruction and the distant sound of sirens, but there was something else, the screams of children begging to be saved. As firefighters rushed onto the scene, they found a terrifying sight. A mother, Roconda Singleton, just standing there, not panicking, not screaming for her children, just watching. It didn't make sense. A parent's instinct is to protect, to fight, to do anything to save their children. But Roconda, she didn't move. Inside the home, 3 innocent lives were struggling against the growing inferno. But here's the chilling question: was this just a tragic accident or something far more sinister? Inside the burning home, terror took over. Thick, black smoke filled the air, making it impossible to breathe. Flames licked the walls, creeping closer with every passing second. The fire was everywhere. Amidst the chaos, 2 of the children, just 10 and 7 years old, fought for their lives. The older sibling, barely more than a child themselves, made a choice that night. With the flames closing in, they grabbed their younger sibling, shielded them from the suffocating heat, and ran. Somehow, they made it out, but someone else was still inside. 12-year-old Shamia Stewart. She was trapped. Maybe she had gotten lost in the smoke. Maybe she was trying to reach her siblings, but the flames had already cut off her path. Outside, the 2 surviving children gasped for air. Their lungs burned, their bodies covered in soot. And there, standing in front of them, was their mother. She had been outside the entire time, watching, doing nothing. The question we all have to ask is why? What could make a mother stand back as her child burned alive? When the fire was finally extinguished, investigators stepped into the charred remains of the home. What they found, it made this case even more horrifying. Every single fire alarm was missing, not destroyed, not melted by the flames, gone. Someone had taken them down. And then, in the backyard, firefighters stumbled upon something strange, a pillowcase. Inside, all the home's smoke detectors, carefully removed before the fire even started. That wasn't all. As investigators examined the wreckage, they found something that confirmed their worst fears: lighter fluid, not just in one place. 2 separate locations, one in the living room, one in the bathroom. 2 different ignition points. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. And the person responsible, the woman who stood outside, watching, doing nothing. Her name, Roconda Singleton. Now we have to ask, was this a moment of madness, or was it cold, calculated murder? If the evidence isn't disturbing enough, eyewitness accounts add an even darker layer to this nightmare. Imagine this: your house is on fire. Your children are inside. Their screams echo through the night. Every instinct, every fiber of your being should be screaming at you to help them, to do something, anything, to save them. But Roconda Singleton, she did nothing. According to witnesses, she stood there, watching, waiting, not calling for help, not trying to break a window, not pleading with firefighters to go in, just standing. And then the most chilling detail. Reports claim she prevented her children from escaping. Let that sink in. A mother standing at the very exit her children needed and refusing to let them out. Why? Why would anyone, let alone their own mother, do such a thing? Was this a moment of insanity? Or had she planned this all along? To understand how something like this could happen, we need to ask who was Roconda Singleton. On the surface, she was a 46-year-old mother of three. She wasn't known to police. She had no official history of domestic violence. There were no clear warning signs that something this horrific was about to happen. So what changed? What could drive a mother to allegedly set fire to her own home with her children inside? Had she been hiding something all along? Was there a deep, unspoken darkness in her life that no one had ever noticed? Or was this a sudden, catastrophic breakdown? Detectives began digging. They wanted to know, was there a reason behind this madness? Or was it simply pure, unexplainable evil? By the time emergency responders arrived, it was already too late. The fire had devoured the home. Smoke choked the air. The structure barely held together. Two children, 10 and 7 years old, had made it out, thanks to the bravery of their older sibling. But one child was still inside. 12-year-old Shamia Stewart. Firefighters rushed into the burning remains of the home. Through the collapsing walls, through the suffocating smoke, they found her. She was unconscious, but somehow she was still alive. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors fought desperately to save her. But the damage was too severe. For 2 days, she held on. For 2 days, her family, her community, and even the first responders who rescued her prayed for a miracle. But on January 27th, she was gone, murdered, not by an accident, not by some faceless, unknown threat, but by the one person meant to protect her. And the question remains, what was going through Roconda Singleton's mind in those moments? Did she feel remorse? Did she feel guilt? Or was she simply waiting for it to be over? Was this a moment of uncontrollable rage, or something much darker? As investigators sifted through the charred remains of the home, the truth became undeniable. This was no accident. There was no faulty wiring. There was no unattended candle. There was no innocent mistake. This fire was deliberately set. The very thought of it was sickening. Someone had trapped 3 children inside a burning house. And yet, the most horrifying part, the person accused of setting the fire was their own mother. Authorities focused on one question: was this an act of pure rage, or was it a calculated decision? To find out, they needed to analyze everything. Where did the fire start? What fueled it? And most importantly, who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity? The deeper they looked, the more disturbing the answers became. And every single clue led back to one person. Arson investigators didn't take long to find the truth buried in the ashes. 2 distinct points of origin. One in the living room, one in the bathroom. Each location doused in lighter fluid. Now, let's stop for a second. 2 separate fire sources. Does that sound like an accident to you? Would an electrical fire start in 2 places at once? Would a kitchen fire suddenly spread to the bathroom without a trail of damage in between? Absolutely not. Someone had poured accelerant. Someone had made sure the flames would spread quickly. And then there was another question: who had access to these areas? Who had a reason to remove every single smoke detector? Who had the most to gain from making sure there was no way out? The answer? One name kept coming up: Roconda Singleton. The only adult in the house. The only person who wasn't trying to escape. The only one standing outside watching. At this point, investigators had enough physical evidence to prove this was arson, but they still needed something even more damning: a testimony. And they got it from the 2 children who survived. The 2 surviving children, just 10 and 7 years old, had lost everything: their home, their sister, their sense of safety. They had escaped the fire, but they would never escape the trauma of what happened that night. And when they spoke, their words sent chills down everyone's spine. They described what happened inside, how the fire spread so fast it was almost as if it was waiting to explode, how their mother stood outside, watching, doing nothing, how she refused to open the door when they tried to get out. And then came the most damning detail. They confirmed what investigators had already suspected. Their mother had taken down the fire alarms. She had removed their only warning system. She had left them there to die. Let's stop and think about this for a moment. Could there be any other explanation? Was there any way this could have been an accident? Or was this a deliberate, calculated act of evil? The aftermath of the fire didn't just leave behind a destroyed home and shattered lives, it sent shockwaves through the entire community. Neighbors, friends, and even extended family were in disbelief. Roconda Singleton, the same woman they had known for years, the mother who never showed any outward signs of aggression. There had been no reports of domestic violence, no public warnings that something was wrong, no history of police intervention. So how could this happen? How could a mother go from ordinary parent to accused murderer overnight? Was something boiling beneath the surface this whole time? Or was this an unpredictable, explosive act of destruction? But as people searched for answers, a darker thought crept in. If there was no history of abuse, what was the motive? This is where the case takes an even darker turn. Because when mothers kill their own children, it's never without a reason, twisted as it may be. Some psychologists argue that cases like this stem from hidden mental illness, a breakdown, an untreated psychosis, or even a delusional state that turns a parent against their own family. Could Roconda have been suffering in silence? Was she experiencing a psychological crisis that no one saw coming? Or was this something much colder? Some experts believe this wasn't a snap decision. They believe this was calculated, that Roconda Singleton saw her children as a burden, that she had been planning this for weeks, maybe even longer. And that's when the most chilling possibility emerges. Was this fire meant to be her escape? A new life, no children, no responsibilities. Was this an act of revenge, a calculated erasure of everything tying her down? Or was there something even more disturbing beneath it all? To answer that, let's go back to one key detail: the fire alarms. Think about it. If this was just a moment of uncontrolled rage, would she have had the presence of mind to remove the fire alarms first? Would she have known exactly how to disable the only thing that could warn her children in time? Would she have poured lighter fluid in two different locations, making sure the fire would spread so fast escape was nearly impossible? Would she have stood outside, waiting, not in shock, not in panic, but with purpose? Everything about this case points to deliberate action. She planned this. She made sure there was no way to stop the fire. She made sure her children wouldn't hear an alarm and wake up in time to run. And most disturbingly, she made sure to watch it all happen. This wasn't a moment of madness. This wasn't losing control. This was something much worse, cold, calculated, intentional. But why? What could possibly drive a mother to erase her own family? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, was this her first attempt, or had she been thinking about this for a long, long time? With overwhelming evidence mounting against her, authorities had no choice but to act. On January 26, 2025, Roconda Singleton was taken into custody. She was charged with multiple counts, including felony murder, arson, and child endangerment. The moment she was placed in handcuffs, the community breathed a sigh of relief, but also felt the weight of an unshakable horror. Because even with her behind bars, one question remained. Why? Why did she do it? What could possibly drive a mother to allegedly set fire to her own home with her children inside? Was this an act of pure evil, a twisted sense of revenge, or the result of a mind unraveling in ways no one saw coming? Investigators had their suspect, but they still didn't have a motive. And as the case moved toward trial, one thing was certain: this story was far from over. Legal experts predict that this case will be one of the most complex trials in recent history. The prosecution will argue that this was first-degree premeditated murder. The missing fire alarms, the multiple ignition points, the eyewitness reports that she stood outside doing nothing, all carefully planned, all leading to one chilling conclusion: she knew exactly what she was doing. But the defense will take a different approach. They may argue that Roconda Singleton wasn't in control of her actions, that she suffered from an untreated mental illness, that she experienced a psychotic break, that the fire was not an act of malice, but a moment of delusion and destruction. But does any of that excuse what happened? Would any explanation make up for the fact that a 12-year-old girl lost her life in the most horrifying way possible? And if this was truly an act of insanity, then why were the fire alarms removed? Why was lighter fluid used in multiple locations? And why, above all else, did she stand there and watch it all happen? The jury will have to decide. Was Roconda Singleton a mentally unstable woman who lost control? Or was she a calculated killer willing to burn her own children alive? The trial will answer that question. But for the two surviving children, no verdict will ever undo what happened. Two children survived the fire that night. But what happens to them now? They've lost their mother. They've lost their sister. They've lost their sense of safety, their home, their childhood. Can they ever truly recover? For the rest of their lives, they will carry the memory of that night, the heat, the smoke, the realization that their own mother tried to kill them. Where do they go from here? Will they be placed in foster care? Will they be separated? Will they ever trust anyone again? And the most heartbreaking question of all: how do you live with the knowledge that your mother chose to watch you die? These children didn't just survive a fire. They survived a betrayal that no child should ever have to face. And no matter what happens in that courtroom, one truth remains: they will carry these scars forever. With the trial approaching, one crucial question will dominate the courtroom: was Roconda Singleton in control of her actions? Experts will analyze every aspect of her mental state, searching for answers. Did she suffer from undiagnosed mental illness? Was this the result of a psychological breakdown, one that no one saw coming? Or was she simply cold, unfeeling, and willing to watch her own children burn? Psychologists will examine her behavior before, during, and after the fire. Before the fire, was there evidence of paranoia, depression, a change in personality? During the fire, why did she show no panic, no fear, no urgency? After the fire, why did she remain so disturbingly calm? If this was a psychotic break, why did she remove the fire alarms in advance? Why did she use lighter fluid in multiple locations? Why did she stand outside, waiting, instead of calling for help? These aren't the actions of someone in a sudden, uncontrollable fit of madness. These are the actions of someone who planned every detail. So now we're left with the most chilling possibility. Was Roconda Singleton fully aware of what she was doing? And if so, why wasn't there a single moment of hesitation? Here's the real question we all need to ask: were there warning signs? Was there any way someone could have stepped in before it was too late? In so many cases like this, there are red flags, warnings that in hindsight seem obvious. Unstable behavior, talk of feeling overwhelmed or trapped, a sudden change in mood or temperament. But with Roconda Singleton, no one saw this coming. There were no public reports of violence, threats, or abuse. There were no calls to authorities about a troubled household. Her children were never removed by child services. So did she hide it well? Was she slowly unraveling behind closed doors? Or was she simply planning this all along, careful not to leave a trace of suspicion? If she had reached out for help, would this have happened at all? Or was this fire always inevitable? The aftermath of this crime isn't just about one family's tragedy, it's about the devastation left behind. This isn't just a news story. It's a wound in the heart of the community. Neighbors, teachers, even strangers have been left shaken. How could a mother do this? How do you ever look at someone you once trusted and reconcile the fact that they were capable of something so horrifying? For the people who knew Roconda Singleton, the hardest part is the betrayal. She wasn't a stranger. She wasn't a career criminal. She was a mother who set fire to her own home with her children inside. And now an entire community is left with unanswered questions. Did they miss the signs? Could anyone have stopped this? And will anyone ever feel safe again, knowing that evil can hide in plain sight? Because if Roconda Singleton, a seemingly ordinary mother, was capable of this, who else might be hiding a darkness no one can see? Now all eyes turn to the courtroom. Will Roconda Singleton spend the rest of her life behind bars? Or will her defense team craft a story that convinces a jury she wasn't in control of her actions? This case is more than just an arson trial. It's a battle between two versions of the truth. The prosecution will argue this was premeditated murder, that Roconda planned this fire in advance, that she removed the fire alarms to prevent an early warning, that she used lighter fluid to ensure the flames spread quickly, that she stood outside and did nothing as her children screamed for help. They will push for the maximum sentence, life in prison with no possibility of parole. But the defense team will fight back. They may claim Roconda wasn't in her right mind, that she was suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness, that the fire wasn't malicious, but rather the act of someone in a psychotic state, detached from reality. And here's the real challenge for the justice system. How do you prove what was happening inside someone's mind? Can a jury truly determine whether she was evil or just broken? Can they ever know for certain whether this was an act of pure malice or the result of a mind spiraling into darkness? Only time will tell. But regardless of the verdict, one fact remains: nothing will ever bring back Shamia Stewart, and nothing will ever erase the trauma left behind. At the end of the day, we're left with one haunting image: a mother standing outside a burning house, watching, waiting, her children inside screaming for help, and she did nothing. The trial will decide her fate. The jury will determine if she was legally insane or if she knew exactly what she was doing. But there's one question only you can answer. Was this a moment of insanity, or was it pure, calculated evil? What do you think?